Week 12 starts today with 3 standalone Thanksgiving games, followed by a standalone Black Friday game tomorrow. If you're a football fan, this weekend is going to be one of the best weekends to watch as many games as possible, as we'll get all year. As I mentioned, 4 standalone games prior to Sunday, and then of course, your normal 2 primetime matchups, Sunday night and Monday night. So week 11, we had a 10-4 record, finally improving a little bit, moving our overall record to 101-63. So eclipsed 100 correct on the year, definitely happy about that. Hopefully we can keep on moving in the right direction as these teams have really started to separate. The news of week 11. The Steelers fired offensive coordinator Matt Canada. A lot of you guys know I'm a Steelers fan. I've been kind of hoping for this. You never hope to call for someone's job, but he just really hasn't been getting it done. Running backs coach Eddie Faulkner is going to serve as the interim offensive coordinator. Quarterbacks coach Mike Sullivan is going to serve as the play caller. The way Mike Tomlin put it, basically, they can't just remove Eddie Faulkner from running back coach or Sullivan from QB's coach, so it'll be a kind of collaborative effort to replace Canada, and I think with Sullivan being the QB coach, being in Kenny Pickett's ear as the play caller, that's going to make sense. So last week, Ken Dorsey, the Bills offensive coordinator, got fired despite a go-ahead touchdown, and really the defense and special teams giving up the lead late. I want to talk about the Steelers offense real quick. They are ranked 28th in points per game, 28th in yards per game, and 27th in touchdowns per game, let alone 31st in passing yards per game. So I mentioned earlier you don't want to call for someone's job, but when you look at Matt Canada's body of work as the offensive coordinator, whether it's been Kenny Pickett, whether it's been an aging Ben Roethlisberger, whether it's been Mitch Trubisky in there, the offense kind of looks the same, and I think at the end of the day, that's why it's a justifiable firing. But I did want to keep the Week 11 recap short. Let's get into the Week 12 games, starting with the first of 3 today, 12:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff. Packers visiting the Lions. The Lions earlier in the year were able to go into Lambeau and beat the Packers pretty soundly. The Packers are coming off a win over the Chargers, and that was one of those 4 incorrect picks from last week that really bothered me because I feel like the Chargers were the better team on the field. And yet on the other side of it, the Lions had to really rally in the final 4 minutes to beat the Bears. And, that's a divisional game. Things can happen in division, and good on the Lions for ultimately pulling that one off. And I think because they're at home, the crowd in Detroit, I expect them to be absolutely wild. This is the first time in forever the Lions have been in contention on Thanksgiving. Of course, the Lions play every single Thanksgiving, and for decades, the fans have gone to those games anyway. This time, they get to go with a purpose, rooting on a team that right now is 8-2 and looking really, really promising. So I can't see Detroit losing this. I think they're going to come out with a lot of energy. I think they're going to sweep the Packers and move to 9-2. That would be incredible to see a Lions team at 9-2. And so we move to the other team that plays every single Thanksgiving, the Dallas Cowboys. Washington is going on the road to Dallas to visit the Cowboys for the 4:30 p.m. Eastern kickoff matchup. This one I think is going to be fairly simple. Dallas is a different team at home. They have a 12-game win streak going back to last season at AT&T Stadium. That certainly helps their case. And I was surprised that Ron Rivera wasn't fired this week after losing to the Giants in the fashion that they did. I expect the Cowboys to do exactly what they've done in pretty much every other win this year, get up early, and just run up the score. I just don't think Washington's going to keep up in this one. Sam Howell has been able to throw for a lot of yards, and I imagine there's going to be some garbage time stuff, but I look at this game, I look at, another team that's going to be really energized, 7-3. Fans in Dallas are going to be going crazy on Thanksgiving, and I think Dallas shows up and shows out, getting the win and going to 8-3. And to round out our Thanksgiving Day of divisional matchup, the 49ers visit the Seahawks for the 8:20 p.m. kickoff. This game has a lot of intrigue. If you look at the Seahawks' upcoming schedule, it's 49ers tonight, Cowboys, 49ers, and then Eagles. That is an absolute gauntlet, especially for a team that just lost to the Rams and has now been swept by the Rams. Just a couple of weeks ago, they had the NFC West division lead, and now they're at potentially risk, I think, of missing the playoffs. So, at home, I feel like this is a must-win for Seattle, and even despite that, I can't pick them. The Niners, after that 3-game skid, They come off their bye week, they absolutely smoke the Jags. And then they come out last week, and Brock Purdy has a perfect passer rating. I just think they've gotten past that losing streak, they've gotten healthy, and a healthy Niners squad against a beat-up Seahawks squad, Geno Smith and Kenneth Walker both have had injuries. There's optimism about them starting, but we'll see where that goes. I'm not picking against this 49ers team right now. 49ers get the win on the road. NFL history will be made with the first ever Black Friday game, 3 o'clock Eastern kickoff. Dolphins visiting the Jets. If you haven't heard, Zach Wilson got benched in that game against the Bills. Just for the last couple of weeks, really not much positive to look at, not only for Zach Wilson, but really for the offense as a whole. So Tim Boyle is supposed to get the start this week. That probably doesn't bode well for them. And, it's a divisional game. You never know what's going to happen. The Jets week 1 beat the Bills despite losing Aaron Rodgers just 4 plays in. But, the Dolphins haven't looked quite as dominant on offense in these last couple of weeks. That probably, I have concern about the Dolphins offense as a whole, especially on the road. Later in the year like this, as the weather gets colder, I just don't think they're going to be as fast. I don't think they're going to be as explosive. That is something to watch, but you don't have to be terribly explosive against this Jets team right now. I really think 17 points, maybe less, is enough here, and I think they're going to be able to muster that. If Tua can take care of the ball, I don't think they'll have any problem against a Tim Boyle-led Jets team. I got the Dolphins going into East Rutherford, New Jersey, and getting the win here. I think Tim Boyle may give the offense a spark. I think they're going to have a surprise touchdown drive somewhere in the game, but the Dolphins offense is just going to be too much. And don't forget, Jalen Ramsey in that Dolphins secondary has started to make a difference. And while the spark may be there from Tim Boyle, he has had a tendency to throw interceptions, and I wouldn't be surprised if Jalen Ramsey gets another one here. Maybe even Black Friday deals, maybe Tim Boyle throws 2. Got the Dolphins winning this one. And so on to Sunday we go in the early window. Buccaneers are visiting the Colts. The Colts have just released Shaq Leonard, which is a really interesting development. I know he's been injured and hasn't played a lot of games, but I didn't expect this, at this stage of the season. As of now, still has to clear waivers and everything. We'll see where that goes. The Buccaneers are coming off a pretty bad loss to the Niners. I mentioned that perfect passer rating game for Brock Purdy. And the Colts, of course, are coming off a bye week in which Shane Steichen is able to, in theory, craft an offensive game plan to attack a Bucs defense that as of late has been giving up a lot of points. I think probably just because of the bye week, I'm going to go with the Colts here. The Buccaneers have been so tough to pick. They were 3-0 early in the season, and since then they've just had a hard time getting anything going. And the Colts have kind of slowly chugged along. They're 5-5. They've got a shot at the postseason, and I think that bye week really helps them out. I'm going to pick the Colts here at home against a struggling Buccaneers team. I think it's going to be close, but I like the Colts to get the win. Oh boy, the Patriots are visiting the Giants. 2 teams that I would certainly think had much higher expectations going into the season. Of course, the Giants were a playoff team last year. The Patriots, despite having an absolute mess with Matt Patricia calling offensive plays and everything else in between, they hire Bill O'Brien to fix everything, and they're sitting here at 2-8, and all the expectations are that Bill Belichick won't be back next season. I don't know who to pick here. Brian Daboll is a former Patriots staff member. Generally speaking, these coaches find ways to beat the Patriots, whether it's Josh McDaniels twice in Denver, and of course, this year in Las Vegas. Actually, last year in Las Vegas, McDaniels got the win as well. When Matt Patricia was the Lions head coach, they were able to beat the Patriots. But man, do I want to pick a Tommy DeVito-led offense to put up enough points against this Patriots defense? I don't know if I do. Of course, they were able to score some points on Washington. Very different team, very different defense. It's just, can the Patriots offense get anything going? The Giants defense, they were really good earlier in the year. But when you get to a point, you've got 3 wins, postseason wishes are all but gone. It's really hard to be that unit that carries the team when you just see your offense sputter and get very little done. I don't like either option. I guess I'm going to pick the Patriots. I'm kind of, looking at bucking that trend of former Patriots staffers winning these games against the Patriots. It's just I don't know how I can pick that Giants offense. I think the Pats defense gets enough done. It's a mess up there in New England. It's a mess for the Giants as well. Toss-up game. Let's go with the better coach in Bill Belichick. Pick the Patriots to win. The Steelers, -1 Matt Canada, are headed to Cincinnati to take on the Bengals, minus Joe Burrow. Of course, he has a wrist ligament tear, out for the season. Super bummed about that. I really do like watching Joe Burrow play. It sucks to lose him, like this. Injured at the beginning of the year. Tough start. They finally get things going. They're looking like one of the best teams in the league. And this comes out of nowhere and takes them out. Now, one thing that helps backup quarterback Zach Browning is that injury earlier in the year. You think about it, Zach Browning got a lot of reps in training camp, in preseason, even probably early in the regular season. You got to think Joe Burrow wasn't practicing a lot because of that soft tissue calf injury. So that certainly gives him a little bit of an advantage. The Steelers match up really well against the Bengals. Even the first game of the year last year, mostly on the back of their defense, they were able to get the win. But even in the second matchup, the final score was 37-30. I believe it was the last time the Steelers offense put up 30 points. I'm only going to pick the Steelers here because of the offensive coordinator change. You look at the frustration, whether it's Najee Harris, whether it's Deontay Johnson, whether it's George Pickens. There's been so much built up frustration over the course of the last season and a half for these guys. I have to think this change at OC is going to really light a fire under them to perform, because if they don't, it starts to look like the problem is them and not the offensive coordinator. This same thing happened last week. I was going to pick the Browns until Deshaun Watson got hurt. They end up winning the game anyway. I was probably going to pick the Bengals in this, going back 2 weeks before the Joe Burrow injury. What do? I got to pick the Steelers here. I got to think that lights enough of a fire. The defense maybe builds on that. If the offense can do literally anything, I have to imagine that helps. Minka Fitzpatrick is trending towards playing as well. That's a big boost for the defense. I'm going to go with the Steelers on the road here. Still a low-scoring game, but I've got them going to 7-4 and keeping their playoff hopes alive in Cincy. The Panthers are headed to Tennessee to take on the Titans. I said last week, I'm never picking the Panthers again. Picked them twice in a row and they let me down. And this definitely doesn't make it any easier. They're certainly not playing a team like Dallas. Last week's pick was much easier. Their defense still gives me pause here against this Titans offense that has struggled outside of Will Levis's first game there against Atlanta. But I have to imagine Derrick Henry, maybe one long ball to DeAndre Hopkins. I just think the Titans offense is going to be able to muster enough. I mean, even looking at the Bears game on Thursday night, the Panthers were able to put up, I think, 6 points on offense. They got a punt return for a touchdown, and they had 2 field goal drives. It hasn't been enough, and whatever the Titans can muster offensively, I think that will be enough. You got to look at this from Mike Vrabel's perspective and Will Levis's perspective. They probably know they're not in a position where they're going to win a bunch more games, and they're probably not going to make a push for the playoffs. No doubt they'll try, but the position they're in just makes it really tough. This is a very winnable game for them to build on for next year, and I think they do all the right things in this game to get the win. I like Mike Vrabel a little better as a head coach than Frank Reich. I think Frank Reich, for the most part, is a good coach, but Vrabel has proven time and time again he can get it done with a lesser roster. I think here the roster may not even be less than, and for that reason I'm going to go with the Titans. Sticking in the AFC South, the Jags are traveling to Houston to take on the Texans. Remember, the Texans' win over the Jags back in Week 3 was the big jump-off point for this team, and they've really played extremely well since then. For the most part, they're now 6-4 and in a very good position to potentially make the postseason with a rookie quarterback. And that rookie quarterback in CJ Stroud may have a chance to go off here again. The Jags defense is much more susceptible to the pass than the run. The only concern is Stroud did throw 3 interceptions last week. Now, they were able to get the win against the Cardinals in the end, but that is one, kind of concerning element. As I mentioned, the Jags defense is better against the run than the pass, and the Texans do try to run the ball to set up the pass. Now, Stroud has shown he can be very effective, just straight drop back passing. But if they're not able to establish anything with the run, it may be a little tougher to get open windows for the pass. The Jags, no doubt look at themselves as a contender, and if they lose this game, get swept by the Texans, and no longer have any chance at a tiebreaker with them, they could drop out of the playoff race entirely. So I think this is a desperation game. I think Doug Peterson has them ready for this. I'll take the Jags on a last-second field goal or a last-second defensive stand to get the win and stay on top in the AFC South. Moving to the final game in the 1 o'clock window, the Saints visiting the Falcons. The Saints are a quiet 5-5. I feel like they've just slowly chugged along. They were building some momentum before the loss to the Josh Dobbs-led Vikings. Now both teams coming off a bye. And I don't know where the Falcons go from here. They've had such a strange season. A lot of winnable games. They're kind of finding ways to lose more so than anything lately. At least Bijan Robinson has been getting some red zone touches, at least as of last week. But some of the decisions, some of the offensive play calling, it makes it tough to trust the Falcons right now, even in an at-home divisional game. This is a really tough decision. The Saints' secondary is looking really good. I'm not sure how important that is. The Falcons don't tend to throw it very much. Man, divisional matchup, Falcons at home. I'm gonna pick the Falcons. It feels like the wrong move. It really does. But this also feels like one of those weird games the Falcons just win with like 5 field goals or something like that. I'm gonna pick the Falcons in this one. I don't have a great rationale for it, but there's gonna be a couple of games every week where the team you don't expect to win wins, and this feels like one that could be that. That's my rationale. Going with the Falcons for some reason at home. And it doesn't get any easier. The Rams are headed to Arizona to take on the Cardinals, the 2-8 Cardinals nonetheless, but they've been a much improved 2-8 team since Kyler Murray has come back. Of course, they were able to win their first game with Kyler Murray back against the aforementioned Falcons, and the Rams have now swept the Seahawks. And that definitely does not make this decision any easier. Both teams are kind of trending upwards, at least in the last few weeks, despite the Cardinals losing last week to a quality Texans team. And it's just, who do you trust more? A Rams team that has won 2 games outside of anybody not named the Seahawks? Or a Cardinals team that has won 2 games total? The Seahawks are a good team. I'm not taking anything away from that Rams win. However, you have to look at that in totality. Is it just a matchup thing? Sean McVay obviously is a very good head coach, and that may be where my decision lies here. Rams on the road, Cardinals at home, a first-year head coach in Gannon against a veteran and a Super Bowl champion in McVay. When everything else seems so up in the air, I'm just going to pick the better coach. I got McVay just finding a way for the Rams to get another win here, make it 2 in a row in the NFC West. And here we go again, another tough matchup and a pivotal matchup in the AFC playoff picture. The Browns are visiting the Broncos. Of course, the now Dorian Thompson-Robinson-led Browns with the Deshaun Watson season-ending injury. They're 7-3. They just beat the Steelers last week in a 13-10 absolute barn burner. And the Broncos, they've gone from 1-5, now winners of 4 straight, to 5-5, and very much alive in the AFC wildcard race. This could be a really tough decision. The Broncos' defense is playing way better. Vance Joseph has that unit playing like we expected them to be when Russell Wilson, initially took over, and really like they played all of last year. But now the offense is getting it together. Now Russell Wilson is playing similar, at least, to vintage Seahawks Russell Wilson. Despite everything I just said, I think in the end my reasoning is less about on-the-field stuff and more about having to travel 2 Mile High for the Browns. After a huge emotional high in beating the Steelers, DTR's first win, obviously, tears of joy on the sideline, I think it's just too much against a Broncos team that, as I said, has been playing much better. Could be a letdown game for the Browns. I think I'm going to go that route. Got the Broncos picking up their 5th one, Sean Payton turning this ship around and steering the Broncos towards a possible wildcard berth. And speaking of playoffs, The Bills are visiting the 9-1 Eagles. The Bills, looked much better last week against the Jets after firing their offensive coordinator, Ken Dorsey. They've got Joe Brady in there calling plays, and the offense did look a lot better. The Eagles, though, I've said it darn near every week. They're gritty, they're tough, they're battle-tested. And, last week they were down 10 to the Chiefs. They come back, they get the win on Monday night. Now, on a short week, they have the Bills coming to town. Both these teams are very different than they were last year. The Bills have been very much up and down. The Eagles aren't dominating teams, but they're finding ways to win in the end. And, with the borderline dysfunction that's been going on in Buffalo, coming to the Link, that's a tough place to play. These Eagles fans are rabid. They're 9-1, as I mentioned. They're going to be as fired up as ever, especially for another good matchup. Coming off that Chiefs win, I've got the Eagles winning another one here. This is not going to be a letdown game. The Bills are too good a team for the Eagles not to get up for this one. And I've just got the Eagles overpowering them. 10 tush pushes for first downs, whatever it's got to be. I got the Eagles getting the win. And to the other side of that Monday night matchup from Week 11, the Chiefs are headed on the road to visit the Raiders, a place where Patrick Mahomes has literally never lost. That definitely doesn't bode well for the Raiders, and while they do play the Chiefs tough, that has been with Derek Carr, that has been, generally big offensive outputs, and, while they have been much better under Antonio Pierce, and they look like a very different team, they weren't able to get the win over the Dolphins. You wonder, does that kind of put a stop to the kind of momentum and everything they've got going on? I'm not picking against the Chiefs and Andy Reid off of a loss. Patrick Mahomes, Andy Reid, they're going to cook up enough to get the win here. I don't know that this is something where they need to, really go into the lab. They cleaned things up. They could have won that game against the Eagles last week. They know that. They're going to be motivated. They're going to go into Vegas, get the win, right the ship, and move to 8-3. So on to the Sunday Night Football matchup. The Ravens are visiting the Chargers. I really hope this is a shootout type matchup. It's so much fun to watch the Chargers and Justin Herbert in these types of games, and I could see it going that way. But, the Ravens are another one of these teams that have been just chugging along, picking up wins, and winning in different ways, whether it's high-scoring games, whether it's low-scoring games. Now, they did lose that game to the Browns a couple of weeks back, but now coming off a bye week, fresh, rested, and going against a Chargers team that they just, how many times can I say it? Every single week, they find ways to lose games, like the game last week, in which Quentin Johnston dropped a pass that, could have gone for a touchdown or at least gotten the Chargers into field goal range at the end there. The Ravens are the better team here. You look at the games they've lost, it's been low-scoring, ugly games to the Colts and the Steelers. Outside of that Browns loss a couple of weeks ago, off the bye week, I don't see that happening again. That's not the type of game the Chargers want to play, and I don't think that's the type of game they can play. So, I've got the Ravens winning this one, probably by a touchdown. And finally, our Monday Night Football matchup for Week 12, the Bears taking on the Vikings. 6-8 weeks ago, I think we would have looked at this and thought it was going to be an absolute stinker, and now I think it's got potential to be really, really good. Justin Fields played quite well against Detroit last week, wasn't able to do quite enough to get the win, and of course, the Bears defense certainly let him down with a, 12-point lead with 4 minutes left. The Vikings are coming off a close loss, weren't quite able to get it done against the Broncos, and my simple reasoning for this one is Brian Flores and the Vikings defense. The crazy blitzes he schemes up, the way they play defense, I just don't think that bodes well for Justin Fields. I do think he's going to escape some of these blitzes and get some big runs, but I don't think they're going to be able to move the ball consistently enough to be able to put up enough points. One thing Josh Dobbs has proven is that he can run this offense and he can score points, and I think they're going to be able to outscore the Bears in the end. No doubt, divisional matchup, again, the Vikings are at home. I think I've picked the home team in almost all these this week. November football, divisional matchups, home team gets a little advantage, and I like the Vikings in this one to get the win on Monday Night Football. I tried to do that recap at the beginning quickly because I knew how long the game footage for this one was, and we're still going over that time limit. So, we will quickly have a recap for our Week 12 picks. I've got the Lions getting the first win of the day on Thanksgiving, got the Cowboys over the Commanders, the 49ers rounding out our Thanksgiving Day games with a win, got the Dolphins over the Jets, Colts over the Buccaneers. Patriots, I guess, over the Giants. Got the Steelers over the Bengals. Titans beating the Panthers. Got the Jags evening the score with the Texans. Got the Falcons over the Saints. Got the Rams over the Cardinals. Broncos beating the Browns. Eagles over the Bills. Chiefs beating the Raiders. Ravens beating the Chargers. And the Vikings beating the Bears. That's going to do it for this one. As always, thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate your support throughout the season. Hope you're all having a happy Thanksgiving. Enjoy the games today, and I'll see you next week.